So Jason Momoa is doing press for Minecraft. So he's going around and doing all these marketing events for it. But I am so happy that one interviewer couldn't help themselves and ask him directly about Dune Messiah. So if you haven't read it, I mean, I think most people here have and are familiar, but spoiler alert, we're going to address the spoiler controversy here too.
You mentioned Dune, and I want to, not to spoil it for folks who aren't familiar with it, but your character dies in the first Dune movie. But in the books, he comes back as a clone. And Dune Messiah is set to start production later this year. Have you gotten a call?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm going to get in trouble or not, but it's the same thing like Game of Thrones, you know what I mean? If you didn't read the books, it's not my fault, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got. There's gonna be. I'm gonna be coming back.
Duncan, Idaho's making a comeback.
I'm making a comeback. You heard it first, right here with you, baby.
Man, that's huge. You just made a lot of people very.
You got
very
me in
happy.
trouble.
I didn't get you in trouble.
It was in the books,
By
man.
the way,
Like you didn't read. It's not my fault.
You're an A-list movie star who's wearing a pink cashmere suit. Like they're not gonna fire you.
I don't think so.
No.
Right now.
I think it's hilarious that the interviewer just went out and said it. You're the one that spoiled it. So it's interesting too, because he just confirmed that he was coming back. And I know some people may have thought, if you're not familiar with the book, could he be coming back in a vision? Because that's a possibility as well. For one of Paul's visions, he could see Duncan. So that could easily have been explained. But I love how the interviewer just goes ahead and says, oh, you come back as a clone, right? And I love it because, as I say in my post here, if you didn't read the books, it's not my fault. You hear that? No more whining in the comments about spoilers. So now it's out there. Now it's confirmed that not only, he's returning, but as the interviewer also said, he's a clone. It's going to be different too, because a lot of people, if they aren't familiar with the books, they won't know exactly what this means. So when he does come back as a Gola, which is a clone that's made from the cells of a dead person, which is a little distinction there, he doesn't have his memories. So there's some more to that story. But speaking about spoilers, if there were people that were disappointed, Frank Herbert spoils this within the first couple pages of Dune Messiah. He tells you right away what the deal is with Duncan Idaho, how he returned, what he's being used for by these nefarious factions scheming against Paul Atreides. They tell you all of that from the very beginning. So Frank Herbert wasn't big on these spoilerific kinds of surprising revelations. The story wasn't crafted for the emphasis to be on the surprise, the revelation. It very much is the journey. And Frank Herbert wanted everyone to just be clued in on these important things because he wanted the reader to be in it, to just be fully engrossed in seeing the characters' journeys, knowing all of these, knowing what they're wrestling with. We're in this similar position in a way to Paul at this time, because Paul has a lot of information as the Kwisatz Haderach, with his powers of prescience and foresight just completely unlocked. There are some things that he doesn't know, and that's part of the story of how some things were blocked from his sight. But he does know a lot of crucial details, and it's not about those surprises. That's actually part of the main theme of the paradox of prescience. To know the future is to be trapped by it. We are clued in from the very beginning as to Duncan Idaho's nature, the Gola clone, and what he's being used for. What is the point? So if this was a spoiler, if you do decide to read the book, it's spoiled right then and there in the very first pages. And the plan, the conspiracy against Paul Atreides, which involves the Gola of Duncan Idaho greatly, is laid out from the beginning. So it's very much chronicling the story, the evolution of these characters. It's very much about the journey. That's just how he wrote things. And from the first Dune book too, it's the same thing. We know that the Atreides are walking into a trap. They know it too, so there's some details there. But we know all of the details of the traitor within House Atreides that will lead to their demise. We know all of that from the beginning. But seeing the characters then, as their stories unfold, knowing all of these details, it just makes it that much more delicious. Seeing their struggles and seeing other characters put the pieces together. That's interesting too. So seeing Lady Jessica try to figure stuff out with the traitor in their midst is engrossing, very interesting. and seeing Dr. Yue's struggles internally as a Suk doctor who's literally conditioned not to betray the ones that they are sworn to serve. It just adds way more depth and layers and nuance to the story. It's very much not about these shallow surprises. So if you didn't read the books, it's not my fault. And also, again, there are some crucial details missing even from this. So spoilers, I guess we'll talk about that. This is technically a new character, again, because this is Duncan Idaho in the flesh as a clone. But at this point in time, Golas didn't have their memories of their original selves. So it's technically a new character. It's not really the Duncan Idaho that we know in the past. It's a very different take. He is trained as a mentat. So we're going to see him use those things, those powers as a mentat. And hopefully we'll see that more fleshed out, because the previous entries didn't really dive into what a mentat does, apart from being human calculators. But there is so much more to that. So that's what he is now. His flesh remembers who he was as a loyal Atreides swordmaster, but his mind is conditioned to be a mentat and Zensuni philosopher. And the memories that he had as soon as he came out of the axolotl tank, it's a new person from that point. So very different, but in all other respects, physically, apart from the eyes, of course, is Duncan Idaho. So there's still a ton more to his character than just Duncan Idaho's back. And I love this point in time with this character. And I do wonder if they're going to portray the metal eyes. I think it's a interesting part of the narrative, especially as the story unfolds. The new Duncan Idaho, I mean, he's given a new name because he's a different person, and it is Hayt, Hayt, a very interesting moniker. But what's fascinating about the Bene Tleilax, and this is their creation. In the previous entries, it wasn't stated in the films, but the Bene Tleilax are the ones that provided the Baron Harkonnen with his particular mentat, which they didn't showcase was a twisted mentat. So it was a human computer without all the boundaries of ethics and morals. He was a very different mentat from Thufir Hawat. But that was one example of the products of the Bene Tleilax. They do these genetic experiments that are very much looked upon with derision by the Empire at large, but that are still useful. Those that are in the corrupt underbelly of society still find uses for these products. The Bene Tleilax would be a huge faction in this century, and they are the ones that, in working with the Spacing Guild, were able to acquire the necessary genetic material from Arrakis, from Duncan, and were able to then make the clone from his fallen flesh. But it is interesting, as the story unfolds, Hayt, the clone of Duncan, not having the memories of his former life, does little things like physical things. It's almost like a physical memory. One point when he is presented to Paul Atreides as the gift, which is supposed to be this psychological poison to Paul, and seeing his dead friend and mentor. But at that moment when he's presented, and after they're finished with their meeting, he just knows that he's been dismissed. And I think Aaliyah wonders, how did he just know that Paul was done and that he was dismissed? He just knew it. Just little subtle things like that. The memories exist in there somewhere in his genetic material. And it's interesting to see, and at this point of the story, these other factions like the Bene Tleilax trying to do what the Bene Gesserit have figured out, this unlocking of your genetic memory. And that there are things that we carry, memories and knowledge that are within our very DNA, our very cells. And that's the whole concept of genetic memory. But it's very interesting to see the Bene Tleilax's take on it. What I'm looking forward to the most for Dune Messiah, this adaptation, is Duncan's story, is the story of Hayt. Seeing the interactions between him and Paul, I think are going to be really interesting, and so many opportunities to really dive into their mindsets, and in particular with Paul, it will affect him greatly. I am happy with how Denis Villeneuve has handled Duncan Idaho's character so far. He's the one that has really done justice to this character that has, in previous adaptations, been pushed to the side or greatly diminished from that original story of Dune. He is a minor character. There's a lot of characters in that book. You can understand that to a degree, that they're having to streamline some things and prioritize other characters that have more to do in that story. So I get it, but it's so nice to see justice done to this character who is such a beloved fan favorite. even though his time, I guess, in the book itself, as far as like specific scenes, is small and can be deemed minor, when he is described and when he is part of the story, or even when he's not, when people are talking about him, his actions have a significant part to play in the story. And he himself has had such an impact on other characters. It was so nice to see them lay the groundwork for Duncan Idaho and Paul's deep friendship, especially now that Dune Messiah is being adapted, because that is such a huge part of the story and such a significant part of the story for Paul's continued evolution. There are things that, of course, I'm nervous about and concerned about when it comes to other characters, but I think I am the most confident when it comes to Duncan Idaho, the character of Hayt, and his interactions with Paul. I'm so excited for him to fill this role again. Love Jason Momoa, loved him as Duncan Idaho. I thought he could do well because I'm a huge Stargate fan and I loved him as Ronan Dex in Atlantis. And I think he did very well in Dune Part 1. One of the reasons why Dune Part 1 is my favorite is the depiction of Duncan Idaho, something that none of the other adaptations really took the time to focus on, of how important he was. And to see his last stand, it was so well done and very much in keeping with the spirit of the novel. There's a lot of stuff up in the air for Dune Messiah. There's a lot of streamlining they're going to have to do. There's a lot of things that they're going to have to adjust for the changes that were made in Dune Part 2, but at least I have confidence. And that they even laid the groundwork then. They teased the little beetle in Dune Part 1 after his last stand. To even include that was so cool, to foreshadow the Talak suit. That's the image on their coat of arms in the previous Dune game. So that's become kind of a soft canon. Even back then, when they didn't know that Dune Messiah was going to be a thing, they didn't even know that Dune Part 2 was going to be a thing. So very cool that they emphasized the importance of his character and still laid the groundwork for that possible adaptation of Dune Messiah, because that was Denis Villeneuve's dream. But I'm curious to know what you think about Jason Momoa confirming his return in Dune Messiah, and how do you feel about his response to people calling that a spoiler? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more sci-fi and fantasy news, theories, and lore. And if you're looking for other ways to support the channel, you can leave a super thanks or join as a YouTube member for early access to new videos and other perks. You can also check out my Patreon page for exclusive content. Thank you all so much for your support. And as always, have a very nerdy day.